So what is the ego? The ego is sort of a self-reference or a symbol that we have about ourselves, and it it doesn't really have a reality. It is a social institution that we create about ourselves. So you could think about it as sort of a reference point. Um, it's a historical kind of depiction of who you are. So I might say I'm a therapist, or I was born here, or I went to school here. You may call yourself an introvert or an extrovert. And so these are all kind of references that you make. Um, these are kind of like self-concepts. You could think about this as sort of a conceptual framework for who you are. Um, and it's kind of like a scaffolding. And that scaffolding is useful for us to get by and to feel comfortable about who we are. And that's what the ego is. It's a self-concept. It's a conceptual reference for who we are. And the problem is with the ego is that it can be limiting, because the conceptual framework that you've created for yourself can, with time, be limiting. You could think about this as a nautilus, which is like a crab that lives in a shell. And after a certain point, the crab, or the nautilus, finds the shell to be a bit constricting, and that's a metaphor for how at times you may feel restricted by your conceptual identity. If you have a specific self-image about yourself, like you're a computer programmer, but you feel inclined to do other things like paint or do a different vocation or career, you may find that challenging. Or if you label yourself an introvert but have an urge to maybe go out and socialize, that's the kind of situation where the shell of the nautilus becomes too small, and there's a period of time when the nautilus actually has to leave that shell and open themselves up to not have a shell for a while until they found a new shell. And you could think about this as sort of the process of outgrowing your ego, or outgrowing your conceptual identity. And this is what happens. And this is how we grow beyond ourselves in sort of transpersonal way, spiritually, personally. And what happens is your conceptual framework, the scaffolding of who you are, when it becomes limiting, you have to start to look for ways to outgrow your self-concept. And the best way to do that is to let go of the reference and really attend to the more of the experiential, immediate felt sense, which is your kind of spontaneous biology, your sensations in your body, your natural inclinations to look for impulses and inspirations to do things that are not tethered to conceptual reality. And that way you can find yourself connecting to completely fecund or unbeknownst nuances of yourself that are open to rediscovery or redefinition, but that has to come from a place of spontaneity. And the other thing is that this conceptual framework or conceptual identity that you create, that we create, it's ever changing. And so when the nautilus finds the new house, that house becomes the new place, and maybe it's a little uncomfortable for a bit, but then it becomes comfortable, and that new conceptual identity becomes their new home. And so, just so you know, whenever, as you outgrow your conceptual identity or ego, you will have then inadvertently another new ego, because that's what the mind and the brain does. And that's completely normal, But just think of it as an ever-evolving self-portrait that continues to challenge and expand on what it conceptually thought was possible. And I mean, on a spiritual level, somebody who is more kind of on an enlightenment track might consider, avoiding all conceptual reality and live in a present, immediate flow of experience and try to really move away from self-concept as much as it's not always possible, but that seems to be the kind of the goal for uh, experiential and self-clarity and enlightenment.